Mit 16 datete Hilary Duff einen 25-jährigen Rockstar.
At 16, Hilary Duff was dating a 25-year-old rock star. And back then, almost nobody called it strange. The cameras smiled. The red carpets welcomed them. She once said she never even felt the age gap. But something shifted. Years later, she walked back into a recording studio and wrote a song about that exact chapter. And this time, the world heard it very differently. One word started showing up everywhere. A word nobody was willing to say in 2004. Now she is asking a question about that man she never let herself ask before. And the answer sits uneasy. The trad wife who quietly detonated a 2-decade silence. Music, picture the version of Hilary Duff the internet loves most. She is barefoot in a Los Angeles kitchen, pulling a fresh loaf of sourdough from the oven, while chickens move around in the backyard and a crochet project, music waits on the couch. That is not some made-up fantasy. It is close to the life she has described as her happiest one. She has even joked about her own trad side, saying she feels most at peace at home with her 4 children and her hens. That soft and glowing image sits behind all those headlines about how stunning she still looks at 38. Then, in February 2026, she cracked that image wide open. After more than a decade away from music, she returned with her 6th music studio album, Luck or Something, released on February 20th through Atlantic Records. At the same time, she announced her first full-scale global headline tour in nearly 20 years. This was not a gentle return built around nostalgia or polished family life. It was something far more personal. The album opened up old wounds and dragged long-buried memories into the light. Through it, she faced predatory men, reckless teenage choices, body shame, and the damage the tabloids did to her before she was even old enough to vote. She explained that people often look at her life from the outside and assume she has everything figured out. What they do not see is how many struggles and painful swings have shaped that calm exterior. The story people like to tell is simple. She is still beautiful after 4 kids. She looks happy. She seems settled. That version exists, but it only tells part music of the truth. Underneath it is a life that holds much darker chapters. There was a period when she was starving herself at 17. There was an armed stalker. There was a teen love triangle that ended years later in tragedy. There was a relationship that many people now describe as predatory. There was a major robbery that stripped her home of valuable jewelry. There was also a comeback show that Disney shut down while it was still being made. Once you look past the glow, the real story becomes harder to forget. The horror hiding behind Lizzie McGuire's smile. At the exact point when Hilary Duff was one of the most watched teenagers on the Disney Channel, she was quietly harming her own body. For a long time, almost no one knew. Years later, she shared that she had battled an eating disorder for about a year when she was 17 and close to turning 18. That period lined up with the height of her fame. Lizzie McGuire had already turned her into a global star before she was old enough to drive, and the pressure around her appearance had become constant. She said the cause felt painfully clear. She was always in front of cameras, and she had taken in the message that actresses were supposed to be thin. When she looked back on that time, she summed it up in 2 words. It was horrifying. That pressure was not vague or distant. Adults commented on her body while she was still a child. Cameras followed music, her everywhere. Reporters asked her how often she weighed herself. She was compared to other girls in the industry who were thinner. That was the machine of early 2000s tabloid culture. And it was working exactly as it always music did, only this time it was working on a teenager who had no real way to escape it. What stands out most is the way she says she found her way out. It did not come from a strict program, music, or some clean turning point. It came with time. It came with growing up. It came with having children and building a stable marriage and slowly reaching a place where the fears that once controlled her no longer had the same power. By the time she posed nude for a magazine cover in 2022, the meaning of that moment had changed completely. She said she felt proud of her body because it had carried and given birth to children. At the same time, she stayed honest about the process. She pointed out that professionals had helped her look that way, from makeup to posing to the way the image was framed. That honesty music matters because it keeps the moment real. She did not present confidence as something easy. She presented it as something earned. That may be one of the clearest parts of her comeback. She is willing to show strength, but she does not pretend it arrived without pain. The 18-year-old who threatened to kill her. In the fall of 2006, a young man traveled across the country because music had become obsessed with Hilary Duff and had started seeing anyone around her as a problem. What followed was frighteningly real. On October 12, 2006, Duff and her then-boyfriend Joel Madden filed for restraining orders. The documents named Maxim Moskovsky, whose surname appeared with different spellings in different reports, along with a 50-year-old roommate named David Joseph Clean. According to the filings, Moskovsky had admitted he was obsessed music with Duff, said he wanted to buy a weapon, threatened to kill himself, and promised dramatic action to get her attention. Over about 6 weeks, the situation kept getting closer. The two men were said to have shown up in Duff's neighborhood near her mother Susan's home, music in Madden's neighborhood, and at a Good Charlotte show in Hollywood. They also contacted Duff's manager directly. Police detained Myaskovsky outside the concert after security flagged the pair. Duff and Madden asked the court to keep both men at least 100 yards away from them, from Duff's sister Haley, and from her mother. Then the fear deepened. The next month, police in Manhattan Beach arrested Moskovsky at a residence after he allegedly threatened to kill Duff that weekend. He was booked on felony stalking and criminal threats charges and held on $200,000 bail. Later that year, Duff and Madden dropped their temporary restraining orders, but that does not soften what happened. This was not a harmless celebrity rumor. It was a real threat aimed at a teenage girl, and it did not end there. In 2015, when Duff was 28, Beverly Hills police warned her about another man who had become fixated on her and wanted to propose. He hired a limo, carried a photo of her house without knowing the full address, and spent 2 hours directing the driver through the area while talking nonstop about marrying her. The driver became so uneasy that he called police. Duff's security team reportedly already knew who the man was because of earlier incidents. Fame came to her at 13, and the danger attached to it stayed with her for years. The tween love triangle that ended in a bathtub long before people openly discussed age gaps and power imbalances. Hilary Duff was caught in one of the most famous teen love triangles of the early 2000s. It became tabloid drama at the time, and years later it ended in heartbreak. The timeline is easy to trace. Duff and pop singer Aaron Carter began dating around his 13th birthday in December 2000. Not long after that, Carter appeared on Lizzie McGuire as himself, performing I Want Candy in a Christmas-themed episode and kissing Duff's character. For a generation of young fans, it felt like a perfect pop culture fantasy. Then, the mood changed. Carter started spending time with Lindsay Lohan while he was still linked to Duff, and the whole thing turned into a public mess. He later described it in a blunt way, saying he had dated Duff for about a year and a half, got bored, started seeing Lohan, and then returned to Duff. Lohan treated it as something brief that had already passed. The tension between the two actresses quickly became one of those stories people never stopped repeating. Years later, Duff confirmed that she deliberately showed up at the August Music 2003 premiere of Lohan's Freaky Friday while she was still a teenager, encouraged by her A Cinderella Story co-star Chad Michael Murray. A few months later, Lohan appeared at the premiere of Duff's Cheaper by the Dozen. Looking back, Duff now talks about it with surprising ease. She sees it as old history. It was childish. It was long ago. It no longer matters to her. The ending of that feud was almost funny in its simplicity. Lohan approached her at a club, asked whether they were good. Duff said yes, and the two took a shot together. What happened to Aaron Carter later gave the whole story a far heavier meaning. On November 5, 2022, Carter Music was found dead at his home in Lancaster, California at 34. The reported cause was drowning in a bathtub music after taking Xanax and inhaling doluroethane, a compressed gas. Duff responded with an emotional Instagram tribute. She told him she was deeply sorry that life had been so hard for him and that he had struggled in music front of the whole world. She remembered the charm that had once drawn her in as a girl and sent love to his family. Later she went further and condemned the plan to publish his unfinished memoir after music his death, calling it a heartless money grab. That full circle is hard to ignore. The boy from the bright and sugary Lizzie McGuire episode became a tragic figure. And the girl who once shared that young romance with him ended up mourning him as someone who had survived the strange world that shaped them both. The relationship she now describes as music predatory. There is one detail from Hilary Duff's past that stops many people the moment they hear it again. At 16, she was publicly dating a 25-year-old rock star, and at the time, very few people treated that as deeply wrong. The relationship began in July 2004, about a year after her breakup music with Aaron Carter. Duff was 16. Joel Madden, the lead singer of Good Charlotte, was 25. They appeared together on red carpets, including the 2005 MTV Video Music Awards, and stayed together until late 2006, when Duff was 19 and ended the relationship. Back then, she spoke warmly music about him. She called him her first love and said she never felt the age gap. In a 2015 interview, she strongly suggested that Madden had been her first sexual partner, giving an answer that left little room for doubt. At that time, the age difference brought some uncomfortable looks, but not the level of outrage it would bring now. The deeper reckoning came years later through her own music. In late 2025, Duff released Mature, the lead single from Luck or Something. She wrote it with her husband, Matthew Koma, and songwriter, Madison Love. The song tells the story of a young girl drawn to an older man who turns out to be much less impressive than she once believed. Fans immediately connected it to Madden. When old interview quotes resurfaced online, the reaction was far harsher than anything the couple faced in 2004. Many people used a word that earlier culture had been unwilling to say. Duff has music handled that chapter with care and clarity. She explained in 2026 that Mature comes from a brief experience long ago and is not fully autobiographical because she allowed herself some artistic freedom. Even so, she made it clear that the emotional truth is still there. She described writing the song as therapeutic and frightening. She also admitted that it led her to question the past in a new way. She found herself wondering whether the man had a pattern of seeking out much younger women, or whether she had simply been convinced she was different. That question carries a quiet ache because it captures the exact tension at the center of the song. It is the music voice of a woman in her late 30s looking back at the girl she used to be, and finally seeing that story without the haze that once covered it. There is another layer that makes the whole thing feel even stranger. Madden later married Nicole Richie, who is much closer to his age. Richie is now said to be both a friend and a neighbor to Duff. She even jokingly praised Mature online, saying that Mature was not the RD she would use for the two of them, though she called the song a bop. Madden reshared the post. At one point, Matthew Koma even dressed as Madden for Halloween. Married at 22, divorced by 28, and the co-parenting she is proudest of. While tabloids stayed busy with stories about her love life, Hilary Duff was building something far more lasting. She got married young, became a mother early, watched that marriage end, and still helped turn the aftermath music into one of the healthiest co-parenting stories in Hollywood. On August 14, 2010, Duff married Canadian NHL player Mike Comrie when she was 22. Then on March 20, 2012, at 24, she gave birth to their son, Luca Cruz Comrie. That new chapter changed her in ways she did not expect. Duff has spoken openly about early motherhood and how deeply it shook her sense of self. After Luca was born, she felt like she lost a big part of her identity for maybe the first year and a half. Slowly, though, she found her way back to herself and came out of that period feeling stronger and more confident. Even so, the marriage did not last. In January 2014, Duff and Comrie announced that they were separating on good terms. She filed for divorce in 2015, and it was finalized in 2016 after about 6 years of marriage. What makes this part of her story stand out is what happened next. The split did not turn into bitterness. It turned into a steady and respectful partnership music centered on Luca. Over time, Duff has described herself and Comrie as a unit that will always be a unit because of the son they share. She has also said she feels lucky that Luca was young enough to grow up with this arrangement, as is normal. That mattered to her. It helped shape a version of family life that felt secure even after the marriage ended. She has also spoken generously about Comrie and said she would not choose anyone else to co-parent with. On Luca's 13th birthday in 2025, she wrote about how strangers often tell her what a nice kid he is and how he carries himself as a sweet, open, thoughtful boy with a cool point of view. That chapter changed more than her family life. It also changed the way she saw love. At one point, by her own account, she had decided she would never get married again. Then life moved in a direction she did not expect, and that next turn began in a recording studio, robbed of a fortune while she posted vacation photos. By the summer of 2017, Hilary Duff was facing a very different kind of problem. While she was away on vacation, thieves entered her Beverly Hills home and left with a huge amount of jewelry. What made the story even more unsettling was the possibility that her own social media posts may have shown them the perfect moment to strike. On July 19, 2017, Duff was in Canada with Luca, who was 5 at the time, visiting Comrie's home country. Back in Beverly Hills, burglars broke through a door at her house and stole jewelry said to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The home security alarm never went off, which only added to the fear surrounding the break-in. Her representative music called it a scary and upsetting situation, but also made clear that her family, staff, home, and pets were all safe. The statement added that Duff had a significant security team that would handle everything going forward. Still, there was another detail that made the whole thing feel even more uncomfortable. Around that time, Duff had been posting photos and videos from her trip in real time. Several outlets raised the same concern. Those posts may have signaled that the house was empty. She was hardly the only celebrity dealing with this. Her break-in happened during a wider wave of home invasions across Los Angeles in 2017. Other victims from that period included Emmy Rossum, Kendall Jenner, Alanis Morissette, Derek Fisher, David Spade, Scott Dick, and Drake. Wealthy neighborhoods across the city were on edge, and Duff's home became one more target in a spree that kept growing. Then, 2 years later, the fear came much closer. In March, Music 2019, Duff and Matthew Coma were at home one evening when they noticed a man in their backyard. They managed to scare him off and called police. Officers later found a missing window screen, which pointed to an attempted break-in that thankfully did not succeed. An LAPD spokesperson confirmed that police responded to a hot prowler call on her block at around 8:30 p.m. taken together. Those moments reveal something darker that has followed Duff for years. From the stalkers of her teen years to the burglars and prowlers of adulthood, fame has carried music, a quiet sense of danger with it. That pressure has sat in the background even during the brightest parts music of her public life, the comeback Disney killed on table. Then came one of the biggest frustrations of her career. In 2019, Hilary Duff was handed what many fans saw as the perfect return. She was set to step back into the music role that made her famous. Within months, the whole thing fell apart, and she was angry enough to let the public see it. The Lizzie McGuire reboot arrived as one of the major early announcements for Disney+. Original creator Terry Minsky returned as showrunner. Duff signed on to play a 30-year-old Lizzie living in New York and trying to make sense of adult life. The project was real enough that 2 episodes were filmed before production suddenly stopped in early 2020. At the center of the conflict was tone. Reports said Disney wanted the series to stay in a family-friendly PG space. Duff and the creative team wanted something more honest, something that reflected what life actually feels like for a woman in her 30s. Later, one writer even suggested that a single risque joke may have made the studio nervous. Duff did not hide how she felt. In a public Instagram statement in December 2020, she said she had been incredibly excited to launch the show on Disney+, and that her passion for the project had never faded. At the same time, she explained that she felt a real responsibility to the fans who had grown up with Lizzie and seen themselves in her. In Duff's view, telling the story music of a 30-year-old woman meant showing that stage of life honestly. She believed Lizzie's music adult chapters deserved the same emotional truth that made her younger years matter so much to people in the first place. That is why Duff made the plea fans still remember. She publicly asked for the show to move to Hulu so the character could be brought to life in a way that felt real. Since Disney also controls music, Hulu, the request felt possible. For a while, many people hoped it might happen. It never did. The reboot was canceled and the reaction from fans was fierce. Many of them had waited nearly 20 years to see where Lizzie ended up. When the show was scrapped, that hope turned into anger toward a company they believed had chosen brand protection over the character people loved. The whole episode remains one of the sharpest disappointments of the streaming era. And it also showed something important about Duff. Even after Disney helped build her career, she was willing to push back when she felt a story deserved better. The numbers behind the pop star people forget she is. That pushback also says something bigger about how often Hilary Duff gets underestimated. So much attention has gone to the eating disorder headline, the age gap conversations, and the celebrity gossip that one basic truth often gets lost. Hilary Duff was never simply a television actress who happened to release a few songs. She was a real pop star, and the numbers make that very clear. Her 2003 debut studio album Metamorphosis was a major success. It reached #1 on the Billboard 200 and sold more than 3 million copies in the United States alone. Within its first 2 years, it had passed 5 million worldwide. That was not a side project. That was a serious breakout. She followed it with her self-titled album in 2004, which also reached Music the Top 10. Then came Most Wanted in 2005, which returned her to #1 on the Billboard 200. She kept going from there. Dignity arrived Music in 2007 and also landed in the top 10. Best of Hilary Duff followed in 2008. Then, after a long break, she returned in 2015 with Breathe In, Breathe Out, another top 10 album, and the same album that would eventually lead her to the man she would marry. Across those years, she built a music career that included 2 chart-topping albums, several more top 10 records, and songs that defined a full generation, including So Yesterday, Music Come Clean, and What Dreams Are Made Of. Her acting career runs just as deep. She had been working on screen since childhood and appeared in Casper Meets Wendy in 1998 before Lizzie McGuire ever arrived. Then came the Disney era and everything that followed it, including Cadet Kelly in 2002, Agent Cody Banks Music in 2003, the Cheaper by the Dozen films in 2003 and 2005, and the hugely popular A Cinderella Story in 2004. As an adult, she stayed just as present. She led a long and successful run on the TV land comedy Younger from 2015 to 2021. After that, she starred in Hulu's How I Met Your Father from 2022 to 2023. That show was eventually canceled, and Duff responded with the same light humor she often uses when people try to diminish her work, especially after one critic called it cringe. So when music people act surprised that a mother of 4 can also lead a world tour, the surprise says more about what they forgot than about who she is. The music was always central to her story. She simply stepped away for a while to raise her family, and now she's carrying that music part of herself forward again. Matthew Coma, 3 home births and a music family of 6. That return to music is also what brought her to the relationship that finally lasted. Fittingly, it started in the same place where so much of her life seems to turn, a recording studio. And at first, there was no big spark at all. Duff met singer, songwriter, and producer Matthew Coma in 2015 while making Breathe In, Breathe Out. He was born on June 5, 1987, only about 3 months music before her. By Duff's own account in Vogue, there was no instant chemistry when they first met. She was walking into a professional session and knew almost nothing about him. As they started talking music about music, though, something began to grow. Even then, their relationship did not move in a straight line. They confirmed they were together in early 2017, split a couple of months later, and then found their music way back to each other near the end of 2017. Duff has joked about how it took 3 tries, and that the third one finally worked. Coma came into that relationship with a strong career of his own. He fronts the band Waneka Bowling League and has written and produced music for artists including Britney Spears, Shania Twain, Zedd, and PNK. From there, their family grew quickly. Their first daughter together, Banks Violet Bear, was born at home on October 25, 2018. Duff announced her arrival by saying that the baby had fully stolen their hearts. In May 2019, the couple got engaged. Then, on December 21st, Music 2019, they got married in a small ceremony in the front yard of their Los Angeles home. The wedding was officiated by Duff's younger co-star, Music Molly Bernard, and actor Chris Mintz-Plasse. Their second daughter, May James Bear, arrived in Music March 2021. Then on May 3, 2024, Duff gave birth at home again to her fourth child and third with Coma, Towns Meadow Bear. Ka announced the birth with a joke that quickly spread everywhere. He praised his music wife as a warrior goddess, joked that the baby looked like no one else in their gene pool, and even offered a cash reward for information on where Duff had been months earlier. Now the household is full and busy in the best way. Luca, the teenager from Duff's first marriage, shares family life with Banks, May, and Towns. Together, they make a family of 6. Through it all, Duff has spoken about music parenting with the same honesty she brings to everything else. In an interview with Parents, she said she does not believe parenting is ever really split evenly. In her experience, the mother carries a larger share of the responsibility music in a lasting way, while a partner helps most by picking up what they can around music, that reality. That honesty is part of what makes this chapter feel so grounded. The beauty of her family life is real. So is the work inside it. Duff never tries to separate those two things. She talks about both music at once, and that makes the whole picture feel more believable. Still stunning at 38 on her own terms this time, and that brings everything back to the music headline. At 38, after 4 children, Hilary Duff is still stunning. That part is true. Yet what matters more now is how clearly she has defined herself beyond that kind of headline. Over the past year, she has made it clear that she wants to focus on the life and music work she has built and on the version of herself she chose, not the one the public once tried to freeze in place. The proof is easy to see. Her album Luck or Something, released on February 20th, 2026, became her first full album in more than a decade. It is an 11-track record co-written by Duff and produced by Matthew Coma, with his longtime collaborator Brian Phillips. The lead single, Mature, pulled in more than 5 million global streams in its first week and earned praise, Music, for pushing her sound forward while still feeling unmistakably like Hilary Duff. Then came the second single, Roommates, which received a glowing music response and quickly became one of the songs people pointed to as a sign of how sharp a return really was. The rest of the album carries that same energy. Songs with titles like Weather for Tennis, Adult Size Medium, and Future Tripping Out dig into adult feelings that do not often show up in the old image people still project onto her. There is anxiety in those songs. There is restlessness. There are thoughts about aging, old relationships, and the strange feeling of reaching the life you once wanted and still having questions. Duff was clear that she had no interest in making an album built around school lunches and surface-level motherhood stories. What interested her more was writing about how motherhood changed the way she feels inside herself. Then came the live return. Before she committed to a full tour, Duff tested the waters with a smaller warm-up run she called Small Rooms, Big Nerves. Even that title revealed a lot. After so many years away from the stage, coming back made her nervous. She admitted that openly. She has also joked about her older songs with refreshing self-awareness, saying some of them make her cringe, while others still feel genuinely great to sing. That warm-up soon turned into the Lucky Me Tour, her first major global headline tour in almost 20 years. The schedule stretches across 7 countries, including the United States, Canada, Mexico, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. It opened with 2 nights in West Palm Beach, Florida on June 21st and 22, 2026, and is set to continue into February 2027. Demand came in strong enough that second nights were added in Los Angeles, New York, Toronto, London, Vancouver, Mexico City, and West Palm Beach. On stage, Duff leans fully into the shape of her whole story. She reaches back to songs like So Yesterday, Come Clean, and What Dreams Are Made Of, while also stepping music forward with the newer material that reflects where she is now. That is what makes this phase feel so satisfying. She is not trying to return to an earlier version of herself. She is bringing every version with her. And for the first time in a long time, she seems completely in charge of how the story is told.